Welcome to Office 2010 Video Project 33. Hey, we're talking Excel, and in this video we're going to talk all about charts. Now, charts are over on the Insert Ribbon tab, and then we can insert charts. Now, why do we have charts? Well, here's some data. This is a cross-tabulated table. That means here's a category, column header, website sales, and kites, that's the product. And over here, so these are sales channels. These are products. Intersection of the column and the row header, that tells us the amount given those two variables. So the kites sold through the website, 151,000. So here's our data. But this is a bunch of numbers, right? Sometimes it's hard to see patterns or trends or other information quickly when you have just the numbers. So charts are a way to visually articulate quantitative data. That just means take number data, make a pretty picture so we understand the pattern quickly. Now we're going to see 7 chart types, and we're going to start with the pie chart. I'd like to take the products. These are the labels. When we create our chart, the chart will call these categories. The numbers, over here I want to do the totals, right? The 3 products. We have a kite store. We sell boomerangs, kites, and toys. So these are our 3 categories or labels. And here's our numbers. These will be called categories. These will be called series. That's the terminology for charts. So now, how do I do this? Right? We've done this, what, 30 times in this class already? You highlight one range, hold Control, highlight another. All right, let's go ahead and go up to pie. And 2 rules about pie. One is never use a 3D pie chart. And I never get this. Basically, every Excel textbook I've ever used gets all fancy, they think, and uses a 3D pie chart. You should only use a 2-dimensional pie chart. Why? Well, what is a pie? The reason we use a pie chart is here are 3 parts, 1, 2, 3, and we want a piece, each number to show up as a piece of the pie. Well, these are proportions or percentages that will show up in the pie. And anytime you have a percentage or proportion, when you tilt the chart like this, it distorts the proportions. So we're never going to use that. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is don't ever put the totals. Sometimes you'll see people do this. And can't do that because these parts are the 1, 2, 3 make up the total. It's the whole pie that will be the actual total, and these are the parts. If you highlight this, then it makes the pie twice as big as it should be. All right, I'm going to highlight these, go up to pie, and boom. All right, now I'm going to point to the edge of this, and when I see my diagonally pointing cursor, I'm going to click and drag inwards. Now let's do some formatting here. Wow, you get the idea though. A chart. You very quickly see the little big Pac-Man eating the other pieces because, wow, kites make up the majority of our sales. And that makes sense at a kite store. These are boomerangs. These are toys. Now, this is called a legend. By default, this comes up, and this is called the pie. We're going to format this a little bit. I want to get rid of this because we can actually add labels that'll say this piece is boomerangs and then show us the percentage. So I'm going to highlight the chart element. This is called a legend. And how do I delete it? I use the keyboard shortcut for delete, delete. All right, now I can go up to layout. These are the context-sensitive chart tools ribbons. There's design, layout, and format. We're going to go to layout. And there's a whole labels group. I'm going to go to, first off, I'm going to add a chart title. Non-centered. I'm going to say above. Now I want to change the font on this title. So I'm going to point to the edge and right-click. I could go down to font, but here's a mini toolbar. I almost never use the mini toolbar, but in this case, I right-click, and there it is right there, the font. So I'm going to click in there and type 10. All right, now I'm going to click down here. You can see that it changed. Reselect the chart title. Now, chart titles, you can actually type anything you want. As soon as you have the outside edge selected, you can type, for instance, sales. Now, I just type sales. Whoops. sales. And I don't see anything there. I remember when in 2007 this new feature came out, and I was so confused. I was like, but I just typed sales. You got to look up to the formula bar. There it is. Hit enter, and you can see the word sales. Now, I want to show you how to link labels, because linking labels to cells allows you to have any chart title update if you change the data in the cell. Now, again, we're going to have to use the formula bar. I could, with this selected, come up here, highlight this, delete, and type an equal sign, and then click on A1. You could see the formula develop here. Now I'm going to click Escape. Escape. What I want to do is show you there's a keyboard shortcut to jump your cursor up to the formula bar. If the label is highlighted, hit F2. And now you can see the cursor is flashing. And now I'm going to type an equal sign and click on cell A1. There is the label. That's the sheet name in little apostrophes. That exclamation point means that it's a sheet reference for a formula. And boom, there is the cell reference. When I hit enter, there it is. Now you can change this, right? So I'm editing the cell, and when I hit enter, it updates there. Now, formatting a chart is pretty easy. We want to add some labels and do a little formatting. Now, I kind of like the colors the way they are, but if you wanted to change them, you would click on the pie. And the way clicking works inside of a chart is once you click, it highlights all the pie pieces. If you want to change just the color of this one, you would have to click it a second time. And now that one is just selected. When you want to format a chart element, just as we did in the cells, we would format cells. We would do Control 1. In a chart, you could do the same thing, Control 1. Control 1 on any particular element opens the format dialog box. Now, this is format data point because that's a data point. If we had been formatting a legend, then this right here would say format legend. All right, so we have this selected. If we want to change the fill, we'd go over here, select solid, and then select whatever you want here. I'm not really going to change this. Maybe I change it to that right there. Oh, that looks terrible. Nevertheless, I'm going to close this. And then Control Z. I kind of like that the way it is. All right, so you could actually change all of them at once. Or if you slow double click, you can format just a particular element. Now, I'm going to click over here. I don't want to just have that one selected because now I want to add labels. If I have just this selected, then when I add the labels, it would add it just to that. So I'm clicking in the white. I'm going to go back up to our layout. And in labels, we're going to go to Data Labels. None of these built-in ones. I'm going to go down here because this will give me complete control. Looks like it shows value. I don't want that. I want the percentage. Look at that. It automatically calculates it just like that. And the category. Remember, we called these categories. So now we can see toys, 12%. I'm going to click Close. Now, notice these are all selected. I'm immediately going to right-click and change the size of that font, and I'm going to change it to 7. Notice I typed 7 and it gave me a 2. I'm going to delete that 2. Then I'm going to click Enter. That's much better. Click in the chart, and now we can move these elements, zoop, just like that. So move each one out, something like that. You could make it as neat as you want, or do what you'd like. All right, so that's a pie chart. We're going to, anytime you have percentages or proportions or you're comparing parts to the whole, you use a pie chart. Next, we want to look at a column chart. Column charts are particularly nice because oftentimes we have a data set like this with column headers and row headers. Now, here's kites, website. So the intersecting cell, or that number represents kites sold through the website. Another nice aspect about column charts is because we get data like this a lot, pivot tables, for example, later we'll learn how to use those. It creates table data with row labels and column labels. And so this column chart we're going to see here is very common, particularly for pivot tables. Now, we're highlighting our data. We go up to Insert, and then we go to Column. I'm going to select this first one. Look at that. Instantly, we can see just with one click, we have our labels down here. Those were the column headers. And in the legend, a color coding legend that tells us what these columns are. That chart is basically done right there. Very nice. We could see within each category here the particular column heights. We could see mail order is the only place where kites don't completely dominate. I'm going to point to this edge up here just like we did for the pie. And then, whoops. When I see that diagonally pointing arrow, and then I can click and drag in a little bit. Now, one thing, let's go ahead and click on the legend. I'd like to show that at the top. I'm going to Control 1 and then say Top. Click Close. That looks great, right? The way that is. Now, I'm going to zoom in. Make sure I click in the cell and then hold Control and roll the wheel, or use that thing right there. I'm going to move this pie off to the side. I'm going to move this column off to the side here too. Actually, I'm going to keep it right here. We saw how to format, do page setup with a chart and a table in, I think, video 19. One last thing I'd like to show before we go on to a different sheet. I got to show you a bar chart. This is a column. Columns are vertical. Bars go side to side. Now, in some textbooks, like I teach statistics, they call this a bar chart, and people get confused. But Excel terminology, columns are vertical and bars are horizontal. Now, I would like to have the same exact chart, but just change the chart type and have a second chart. No problem. You can copy charts just like you can data in the cells. I'm going to click on the edge and Control C for copy. I'm going to click right here, Control V. All right, so now I have a duplicate. I'm immediately going to change the chart type. Design, change chart type. There's bar. I'm going to select that one right there. These are so silly. That is, let me just show you this. This is called chart junk. I'm going to click OK. That's just so silly. The only people that would ever get away with using that is maybe a cone manufacturer. But that just distorts everything and makes it hard to understand. This is called chart junk. I'm going to Control Z. Go back up here, change chart, bar, click on that right there. Sometimes bars are nice because you can see the differences visually. The differences between the bars are easier to see when you have it orientated horizontally. Now, we want to do two things with these charts. I want to show you how to format an axis here. I don't really need those zeros there. So I'm going to click on the axis and Control 1. Each format element is easy with Control 1. Oh, so when you have numbers, there's going to be a number tab, just like we saw with the cells. I'm going to say decimals 0, and then click Close. Now I'm going to click down here. Actually, one other thing we can do here, that dash comes from the accounting format. I'm going to Control 1. Go back to number, and maybe show number. Notice what happens right here. Number shows 0. I'm going to click Close. I'm going to click down here, the same thing, Control 1. Click number, a number category over here, and then the number format. 0. And I'm going to hit Tab to move to the next place in this dialog box, just because that'll enact it, and we can take a look here at live preview. That's looking good. I'm going to click Close. All right, so pie, comparing parts to the whole or percentages. Column or bar when you have cross-tabulated data like this. Next, we want to go over to our sheet number 4, and we want to look at a line chart. Line charts are great when you have a category. This should actually say quarter. a category like a label, and a number. This category will go on the horizontal axis, and this will go on the vertical, and we'll see an up and down line. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight this, go up to Insert, and then Line. Line charts are great if you want to see like the trend visually, not necessarily the whole column, but just the up and down trend. Now, when we create this chart by default, notice it took this word from there, and then it has this legend over here. Now, the legend's great if you have multiple lines going here, which you can easily do. But right now, this is duplicate data. That's an example of chart junk. You want to eliminate as much chart junk as you can. I'm going to click here and hit Delete. Now, another problem with this chart, it's very high. Do we really need all of these numbers here? No, because it looks like the range is over here. So we can actually change the range on this axis. I'm going to click on this axis, Ctrl 1. And we have a minimum and a maximum. So our minimum, what do you say? Something like 400,000. So I'm going to click Fixed, 400,000. And then click Close. And so immediately we've limited that range. And we can see the up and down peaks. Maybe we should even change it to 500. With this still selected, Control 1. Change that to a 5. Click Close. All right. We could also add data points here to get specific, the actual number. Let's go to Layout, Data Labels, More. And this is an example where we actually might want to have the value. Over in our pie chart, we wanted category name and percentage. All right, click Close. All right, and then you could click on individual points. That one's fine. That one's fine. I probably want to move this one up a little bit and this one down a little bit. Whoops. Notice I highlighted the whole thing. Lucky we have Control Z. I'm going to click on that. Click on it a second time. See if I can grab it and move it. Maybe we don't need these lines here now that we have that. We can click on the line, and the keyboard shortcut for delete is Delete. That's looking pretty good. And that's probably not the best label, so we probably need a period. So I'm going to say 2011 sales. Notice it's kind of weird. I clicked and typed, but I don't see anything here. It's all happening up in the formula bar. Enter. All right, so that's an example of, I'm going to point to the edge and click and drag. Let's change this to Control 1. Definitely don't need under number to show all those decimal places. You actually could even maybe get away with not having this here, if you don't mind just those, by clicking it and deleting it. But I'm going to keep them there. All right, line charts you use when you have a category and a single number. Let's look at a different one right here. Now, line charts, oftentimes people say, well, this is a number here. Shouldn't we use the XY scatter? Well, no, this is really a category. There's an equidistance between each category, and that's the definition of a line chart. Equidistant category here and a line. This line is determined by a number going up the vertical axis. So I'm going to highlight all this. Even though that's a year, it's still a category. Now we're going to run into a problem here, and we will fix it. I'm going to go to line, and then boom. This is a common problem because it is expecting a category here. And what did it do? It plotted it down here. So we're going to have to fix this. Up under Chart Tools, Design, Select Data. This is where the real power of charting is, because charts will misinterpret your data sometimes. So when you come up here, you have the full power. Here's the legend, entries, the series. That's the series is always the numbers, and then the categories are the labels. Look what it did. It put some default here, and it put both numbers over here. So we're going to click on Year, and then Remove. One thing that's nice about this dialog box is you can click here and edit, right? And then change actually the series name. Remember, the series name is the name they give to the data points. You can change that, and you can change the values. You can edit them. I'm going to click OK. You could also click As. For some advanced charts, forget it. You can't get the chart to interpret it the way you want. So you just come here and add, and then just highlight whatever cells you want. All right, so Edit. And then we need to say, there are our labels for the horizontal axis. And then click OK. Click OK. This is the real power of charting. Now, again, we have some chart junk. I'm going to click here, Delete. I'm going to click here and type 2011 sales, Enter. All right, so there, wow. So there's an upward trend from 2000 to 2012. Again, the reason we use charts is to get a more immediate impact of the quantitative data or the number data. Here we can quickly see the trend. Yeah, it's volatile, but over between 2000 and 2012, there's a general upward trend in sales. One last chart. I'm going to scoot this over to the side. I'm going to click in a cell and Control and roll. Put this right there. Notice I'm pointing to the edge with that move cursor. One last chart before we move on to XY scatter chart. Sometimes you want to change the chart type. So for example, here we have only a line, but sometimes you want a column and a line. Now I'm going to highlight this. We have a category and two numbers. We're going to start with a column chart. And what it will do is it will interpret these as categories and then add two columns. I'm going to go up to Insert, Column, and just select this one. This is not what we want, but it's easy enough to change. I'm actually going to click on the legend, Control 1, Top, Close. Now let's click our expenses. Remember, chart elements, pies or columns, if you click once, it highlights all that particular data series. If you click a second time, like a slow double click, it highlights just that, the single column. I'm going to click over there, click once, and now I want to go up to Change Chart Type. Chart Tools, Design, Change Chart Type. I'm going to select Line. I'm going to select that one right there, and then click OK. And just like that, now we can see there's a line, and line for the expenses, column gives us the revenue. All right, now we've been talking about lines here. Equidistance categories and then one number on the vertical axis. Equidistance categories on the horizontal axis for this one. One number defining the vertical axis. But now what if you have two numbers? We're going to go to this chart 5 sheet. Perfect situation where you want to use the XY scatter. Now this data set here, it says hours spent studying per week for your statistics class. And over here it says the final score. Right? So we have two numbers, and we're wondering if there's a relationship between these two numbers. The more you study, the lower your score. The more you study, the higher your score. Maybe there's a relationship like that. So let's highlight this whole data set. I'm going to click in one cell and Control asterisk. This is XY. X should always be in the first column on the left, and the Y over on this column. I'm going to go up to Insert, Scatter, and just select this right here. Now I'm going to Control and roll. So it looks like we have some chart junk here. I don't need that, so I'm going to click on it and delete. So axis, axis. Have no idea what these numbers mean. You gotta label them. So what's this? This is hours studying. So I'm going to go up to Layout, Axis Titles, Horizontal. I'm going to say Below. I'm immediately going to hit the F2 key to jump my cursor up to the formula bar, type in =, and this is the X. So I'm going to click on cell A1. And then Enter. Now I'm going to go back up to axis titles. I want the vertical. I'm going to say maybe vertical axis, this one here. Immediately I'm going to hit F2. That jumps my cursor up to the formula bar, equal sign, and then click on that one right there. I'm going to click in this cell and change the label here. I'm just going to type test score, enter. Isn't that nice? It immediately updates now that we've linked our X and Y axis labels to the cells. That's not a particularly good title for us, so I'm going to click there and type is there a relationship? Enter. One last thing about XY scatter. We can click on the data points, and we can actually add a trend line, which is like a kind of average. If you take algebra, linear algebra, you'll learn about how to do regression and learn how to calculate a line like this. But for a chart, it's easy. It'll do all the math for you. I'm going to right-click these data points, and there's Add Trend Line. And Add Trend Line, I can say linear, and I can even say calculate the equation in R squared. Now, you'd learn that in a statistics class or an advanced accounting class or something like that. And you'll see that it's quite complex to calculate. But no way, this chart just does it all that quickly. I'm going to click Close. There's the equation. I'm going to click on it. And then when I see my move cursor, I'm going to click and drag. Important note here about the difference between an XY scatter and the line charts we did over here. People often confuse these. Even my dad, who's a PhD physicist, had to phone me up and say, which chart do I use? When you do a line chart, there's only one number, and it's represented on the vertical axis. Categories, equidistance are on the horizontal axis. When you do an XY scatter, there's two numbers. You move out the horizontal or x-axis a certain distance, and then up a certain distance. Both axes have a number, and you measure on each one. So XY scatter, two numbers. Line chart, just one. Now, a couple last things in this video. I want to show you two keyboard shortcuts, and then I want to show you a great new feature in 2000 that was added in 2010. Let's go over to this Chart 6 sheet, and I want to show you two keyboard shortcuts. Now, there's a default chart. By default, the default chart is column. And there's two keyboard shortcuts. If I have a column of data like this and I want the default chart on this sheet, I can use Alt F1. Alt F1. Just like that. One keyboard shortcut, and we have our chart. Now, same data set. If you wanted it inserted as a new sheet, you would use the keyboard shortcut F11. Now watch this, F11, and just like that, I get chart 1 on a sheet all by itself. Alt F1, chart on the sheet. F11, actually a new sheet. Now, sometimes you build your chart and you have it all set up perfectly, and you'd like to actually add it as a sheet. You can go up to Design and then Move Chart, and it will ask you where do you want to move it. Object in, and you can select any sheet or as a new sheet. Awesome keyboard shortcuts. Now, one other thing before we look at this new 2010 feature. If we looked at column, bar, pie, line, XY scatter, and we're going to look at Sparklines. But if you're not sure which chart to use, depending on what kind of data you have, the help inside of Excel is quite excellent. Just like when we saw for functions, when we clicked on our functions and read about functions, the help on the function, that's pretty good. Now, the keyboard shortcut for help is F1. And then you can click up here. You see there's a chart, but type chart types. Available chart types, change chart types. So I'm going to say available chart types. And it's quite amazing. This has actually got some really good information. You know, sometimes we make fun of help inside of Microsoft Office, but this is one of those areas where it just does a pretty darn good job. You can actually just scroll down through all of them, and it goes one by one, has good examples. Obviously, we know by now that's not a good example because 3D pie charts distort the proportions. All right, one last thing. Let's go ahead and click on Chart 7. And we want to talk about Sparklines, a great new feature in Excel 2010. I'm going to go to Insert. There's our charts. Right next to it are Sparklines. Now, Sparklines are just charts that go into a cell. So little teeny charts. Now, this data set here, test 1, test 2, test 3, we have categorized and counted. So how many people got from 0 to 20 on their test? 1. 20 to 40? 5. How many got from 80 to 100? 10 people. So this is a count. We would like to make a little column chart up here. It just shows us the distribution. And then we can compare the distribution between the 3 tests. All right. Cell charts. So you have to highlight the cells in advance. We're going to go up here, and we're going to do column. Data range, I simply highlight the actual data points, not the totals. Not the totals there, just the data points. Click OK. Easy as that. Wow, look at that. So we can clearly see the example here. There's some pretty tall columns in the early 3 categories, right? But as we go from test 1 to test 2, right, you could see not very many there. Went down. But when we get to our final test, wow, look at those columns. None over here where we actually had some over here. This one was quite big. So test 1, we could see the pattern is, oh, well, there was a bunch of low scores. Over in test 3, we could see the pattern is, oh, there's a bunch of high scores. You could also go to Design, Sparkline Tools, Design, Context Sensitive Ribbons. You could change the color. You could add a high point and a few other. So that was the high count there. Again, looking at the pattern, wow. Finally, test 3, wow, the high, that means the high count for tests within this category were in the high 80 to 100 range. Let's look at another Sparkline example. Sales, right? So we have day 1, 2, 3. We want to see a line chart to see the trend. So I'm simply going to highlight here, insert. Oh, a line. Highlight the data. We just have that data. Click OK. We could even come up here to the Sparkline design. We could say high point, low point. We could come over here to marker colors. High point. I'm going to make the high point green. The low point, how about let's make it red or whatever color you like. All right, Sparklines. And so maybe you have your data set that big, and you just see it's like a little cell chart. All right, that's a bunch about charts. We looked at column, bar, pie, line, XY scatter, combining 2 charts, Sparklines, formatting, deleting elements, even some keyboard shortcuts for creating charts. All right, next video we'll start talking about our data analysis features in Excel. Oh yeah, there's some homework now. For homework sheet 7. There's 1, 2, 3 instructions, 3 data sets, and let's see, 3, 4, 5. So you got to create 5 charts, and there's don't look at the answers yet. Oh no, don't look. Pretend you didn't see that. You complete them and then see if you can do it without looking over there. All right, see you next video.